there are more than 18,000 law enforcement agencies in the United States. America's police officers are the best in the world, and that is due in large part to their bravery, skill, and integrity in what they do. Our Constitution ensures that the government is responsible to its citizens and that certain rights should not be violated by the government. But that does not mean that things always work perfectly, as you noted in one of your responses in the real world. So while the vast majority of police officers do exemplary work and build strong relationships with their communities to keep the public safe, there have been specific use of force, deadly incidents that have sparked nationwide outrage. Some of these incidents have led the Attorney General's Civil Rights Division to do investigations into whether individual police departments have a quote-unquote pattern of practice, unquote, of unconstitutional policing, and to make sure police departments are compliant with the law. And when these investigations find that police departments are engaged in unconstitutional policing, they are frequently resolved through consent decrees with the Department of Justice, which requires police departments to undertake certain important reforms that are overseen by independent monitors to ensure that necessary changes are being made in these departments. Senator Sessions, you once wrote that, and I quote, "Consent decrees have a profound effect on our legal system as they constitute an end run around the democratic processes," end quote. Currently, more than 20 police departments around the country are engaged in consent decrees with the Justice Department. In Maryland, Baltimore Mayor Catherine Pugh said Monday she expects her city to finalize a consent decree with the Justice Department this week, as noted in the Baltimore Sun. My question is, will you commit to maintaining and enforcing the consent decrees that the Justice Department has negotiated during this administration?
Those decrees remain in force until and if they're changed, and they would be enforced. The consent decree itself is not necessarily a bad thing. It could be a legitimate decision. There can be circumstances in which police departments are subject to a lawsuit, which is what starts this process, ultimately ending in a consent decree. But I think there's concern that good police officers and good departments can be sued by the Department of Justice when you just have individuals within a department who have done wrong, and those individuals need to be prosecuted. And these lawsuits undermine the respect for police officers and create an impression that the entire department is not in doing their work consistent with fidelity to law and fairness, and we need to be careful before we do that. That's what I would say to you, because of filing a lawsuit against a police department has ramifications sometimes beyond what a lot of people think, and it can impact morale of the officers. It can impact and affect the view of citizens to their police department. And I just think that caution is always required in these cases.
Senator
I wouldn't
Sessions,
prejudge a specific case.
I understand that, but showing of a pattern of practice needs to be shown. So these are not just a road. They're doing something that would be deemed unconstitutional. So are you saying that with regard to negotiated consent decrees that you will revisit these consent decrees and perhaps give police departments a second bite at the apple so that they can undo some of the requirements on them?
Well, presumably the Department of Justice under the Holder-Lynch leadership always would be expecting to end these decrees at some point. So I just wouldn't commit that there would never be any changes in them. And if departments have complied or reached other developments that could justify the withdrawal or modification of the consent decree, of course I would do that.
Well, usually consent decrees require when they end, it's because they have complied with the provisions of the consent decree. So I'm just trying to get a simple answer.
Well, I'll
and
give
I
you a
hope that
simple
you would.
answer. It's a difficult thing for a city to be sued by the Department of Justice and to be told that your police department is systematically failing to serve the people of the state or the city. And so that's an august responsibility of the Attorney General and the Department of Justice. And so they often feel forced to agree to a consent decree just to remove that stigma. And sometimes there are difficulties there. So I just think we need to be careful and respectful
I
of the
understand
department.
that, but as to the consent decrees that were negotiated with both parties in full, faith to do what's appropriate, that you would leave those intact unless there are some exigent or some extraordinary circumstances. Of course, going forward as Attorney General, you can enter into whatever consent decrees you deem appropriate. Appropriate. So my question really is the existing consent decrees, which took a lot to negotiate, by the way. And it's not the vast majority of police departments in this country. It's 20.
You can answer that if you want to, and then we'll move on.
I understand what you're saying, and one of the impacts of a consent decree is it does require judicial approval of any alteration in it, and it